you get raped in your dirty fucking bra. You shit out health. Armored assassins, where I bet their penises are armored, so their penises are wearing like a metal.
People need to do the following homework. Read any novel or watch any movie. Well, not exactly any novel or any movie. The movie or the novel has to have an evil character, or a character that is meant to be perceived as evil. Well, they all do, right? I would personally suggest Stephen King or Dean Koontz books. Dean Koontz books work especially great for this exercise because there is a mental exercise involved here. That's the homework. The bad guy character preferably has to be someone who is like an average person. Like someone you could easily imagine, living out there in the world. And so preferably this character is not a supernatural being. Using Randall Flagg from Stephen King books is not good for this exercise. I think Randall Flagg represents the Wedge world order and how it operates. So it's an evil man representing a concept. You want somebody who is more human, You also don't want some James Bond type villain where it's an evil tycoon who is a fucking billionaire. No, you want an evil character who is realistic, where he might be wealthy or he might not be, but he's not like wealthy where he can put a fucking laser beam weapon in space or something like, build a volcano lair. Yeah, you know what I mean. So Dean Koontz books are good for this. Actually, even if the villain has supernatural powers, which some of them do in Dean Koontz books, this mental exercise can still apply. The idea is to read about that character and analyze how he is actually not an evil guy and does not deserve to be punished for his crimes, or it could be a she. And you know why? Because he was driven mad by the Wedge world order and its mindfuck shenanigans and other more direct assaults on the mind and body. So it's not the evil guy's fault. So analyze each thing this villain does and examine which facet of psychological warfare by the Wedge world order that his behavior stems from. Consider things like feminism, sexual degeneracy on television, anti-white propaganda, counterculture revolution, and biggest of all, how the rigged financial system and the economy could be driving this character to commit various acts that would be labeled as crimes. Like, you have the Federal Reserve Bank, designed deliberately to collapse the economy slowly over a span of many decades, with all of its tactics, and how people must increasingly work themselves to the bone to barely scrape by because of how great of a job the Federal Reserve has done with what it was supposed to do. Analyze how these influences inspire the villain to commit the crimes he or she are depicted committing. So, if the villain is selling drugs, or if he robs a bank, or he commits some kind of a burglary, consider that this is because of what the Federal Reserve has done to the world, and it's not his fault that he's compelled to do these things, and the whole point of this exercise is to teach you that the Hegelian dialectic of good versus evil. Yes, I just called good versus evil a Hegelian fucking dialectic. Or especially, better yet, it's law-abiding citizens versus criminals. Yes, I just called the whole contest between law-abiding citizens and criminals a Hegelian dialectic. And that it's a fraud. It's a deliberately manufactured circumstance and perception to promote the police state and chaos and decay of civilization. The need for police and prisons is a fraud. Also, consider how the villain might be affected if exposed to the knowledge of the wedge world order. And if he actually believes the truth, where might he target his bloodlust instead? Would his bloodlust shift from the original targets that are the main characters in the book toward perhaps some other people that are in high places right now? Consider also the toxic products created by the wedge world order that might have influenced the villain to become bad, or to gain some kind of physical deformity or disability or disorder or illness that causes him misery and suffering, and therefore forces him to commit crimes to cope. So some toxic product, a vaccine that is deliberately toxic, damaged his brain so he can't control certain impulses, negative impulses that are generated in him by the negative influence of the wedge world order. So, for example, you could consider toxic childhood vaccines as having an influence. Dean Koontz, the agent of darkness that he is, likes to glorify diseases and maladies and genetic disorders. His favorite is, of course, autism. He glorifies autistic children, but at the same time glorifies vaccinations. What a fucking cunt, huh? He glorifies Down's syndrome. Like, such a brain damage is going to perhaps give you psychic powers. On the surface, to the average dupes, it seems like he's just bringing awareness to these disorders. So it's with good intention to make people more understanding of people who struggle with these disorders. But it serves a double purpose. It also conditions people to accept this shit as part of the natural order of things, when it's not. It conditions people to not question it. These diseases have been deliberately manufactured by the wedge world order with their fraud bullshit. Dean Koontz likes to evoke the disease of cancer a lot, like somebody in the book dying of cancer. Like, cancer hasn't been brought to us by the wedge world order as well. He'll also dig up very obscure disorders, like some guy has light sensitivity where light touching his skin too much would kill him. And, he writes about that. It's all designed to get you to accept this as the new normal. Get your vaccines, get your autism, give your fucking dog a vaccine, go insane from autism, turn into a fucking villain, have the wedge world order police fucking put the kibosh on you, and wreck your life even further. If you're not a stupid normie, if you're sane, you actually get kind of envious of Dean Koontz villains. You actually end up wishing you could do the shit they do in order to cope with the psychological warfare of the wedge world order. These horror novels, I guess they're like MK Ultra in some way, because in a way they encourage you to want to be bad, even though on the surface they purport to do the opposite, that they promote good. For example, read about the villain in the novel The Face, and the funny things he does. Don't you just wish you could be like him and do what he does in order to cope with the mental torment of living in the wedge world order? The things he does are so funny. It would really help you cope with an otherwise meaningless life where you're just expected to work as a slave and go along with everything. So you do this exercise where you read about these evil characters and you bring the wedge world order into the equation. Because that's what shapes our entire world and negatively impacts our health and our minds. And view the character from that aspect. How the wedge world order conditions influenced him to become that way. You'll realize evil doesn't exist. Good versus evil, criminals versus the law-abiding citizens, is nothing more than a Hegelian dialectic designed to lead everyone into deeper enslavement by the wedge world order, both the good and the bad alike. Then you'll realize how simple the solution would be to stop the so-called bad guy. Just wake him up to the wedge world order. There is no need to shoot him, no need for the good guys to run from him or fight back, to have the police force chase him around, or have some dangerous climactic showdown with the guy. Then you'll come to realize that we need to defund the police and abolish prisons.